Have you ever witnessed a mother breaking a single stale croissant into 3 uneven pieces, keeping only the crumbs for herself so her children could feel the illusion of fullness? A Sunday evening in the Boston Public Garden, a billionaire widower observes a single mother who cannot afford a hot meal for her son. His little daughter, shivering in her cashmere coat, tugs his hand and whispers, "Daddy, look, she's pretending she's not hungry." That innocent observation unleashes a cascade of events that no blueprint could ever predict. What begins as a simple gesture of warmth transforms into a structural renovation of 4 broken lives. Stay until the very end of this story to discover how a simple, silent observation transformed 4 broken destinies into a masterpiece of redemption. The December wind whipped through the bare branches of the elms in the Boston Public Garden, painting long skeletal shadows across the snow. Thomas walked through the winding paths just as he had done every twilight for the past 3 years. At 41, he was an architect who had designed the city's tallest skylines, yet he had never learned how to rebuild the ruins of his own life. He wore a charcoal wool coat that cost more than most cars, and his handcrafted Oxford shoes crunched against the thin layer of frost. But the cold he felt came from within. It was a stark, hollowing chill that had settled in his chest the day his wife, Sarah, lost her battle with cancer. Beside him walked Mia, his 7-year-old daughter. She was a splash of color in his gray world, wrapped in a bright red scarf and matching mittens. She skipped over the frozen puddles, pointing at the holiday lights flickering in the distance and the squirrels scrambling for the last acorns of the season. Thomas watched her with a tenderness that ached. She had her mother's eyes, a piercing, intelligent blue, and her mother's relentless optimism. But even his profound love for her couldn't fill the silence that echoed in their sprawling brownstone on Beacon Hill. The park was filled with families bundled up against the cold, their breath forming clouds of laughter in the frigid air, couples holding hands in gloved intimacy, everything Thomas had lost and believed he could never reconstruct. "Daddy, look, that cart is selling hot cocoa and roasted nuts. Can we get some?" Mia asked, pulling on the sleeve of his coat. Her nose was pink from the chill, her eyes wide with the simple desire for warmth. Thomas nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He reached for his leather wallet, the motion automatic. For Thomas, money was an abstraction, a tool like a ruler or a compass, never a source of worry. But it had also proven useless against the tragedy that had dismantled his family. While Mia happily blew on the steam rising from her cup of cocoa, Thomas sat on a frozen iron bench, brushing away the snow. He observed the world with the clinical detachment of a scientist. The distant hum of traffic on Arlington Street, the joyous shrieks of children sledding on a small incline. It all felt like a movie he was watching from behind a thick pane of glass. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another urgent email from the firm, another skyscraper needing approval, another gala invitation he would decline. He ignored it. For the first time in months, he decided to simply exist in the moment, even if that moment was colored by the slate-gray hue of his grief. He watched Mia run toward the duckling statuette, her laughter ringing out like a silver bell in a tomb. "Push me, Daddy, push me on the imaginary swing," she yelled, running to an empty space between 2 trees where they used to play. Thomas stood up, the cold seeping into his bones. He walked over and played along, lifting her into the air, listening to her giggle. For a second, the weight on his shoulders lightened. Perhaps the structure of his life wasn't entirely condemned. Perhaps, in the foundation of his daughter's joy, there was enough stability to build something new. But the thought was fleeting, swept away by the bitter wind. Once they left this park, they would return to the echo chamber of their home, where the silence was loud enough to scream. "I love you, Daddy," Mia said suddenly, wrapping her small arms around his leg. Thomas crouched down, ignoring the snow soaking into his expensive trousers. "I love you too, my little blueprint. More than all the bricks in Boston." They held the embrace, a fortress of 2 against the winter. When they pulled apart, Mia pointed toward a darker, secluded bench near the weeping willows. "Daddy, look over there." Thomas followed her gaze. And there, freezing in the shadows, another story was unfolding. A story that was about to collide with theirs. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bench, trying to use her body as a shield against the wind for her son, Leo. At 34, her face was a map of exhaustion, her skin pale and translucent like parchment. She wore a thin navy trench coat that was woefully inadequate for a New England winter, and a knitted grey scarf that was fraying at the edges. She held a small crumpled bakery bag on her lap as if it contained diamonds. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days so that Leo could have the school lunch. Now it was Sunday and school was closed. In her pocket, she had exactly $3.40. The shelter didn't open its doors for another 2 hours, and the library had closed early. The park was their waiting room. "Mama, look at the lights," Leo said, his teeth chattering slightly. At 5 years old, he had the large, soulful eyes of a child who has seen too much worry too soon. Elena smiled, a painful expression that didn't reach her eyes. "They are beautiful, Leo, like stars that fell down, right?" Leo nodded, but his eyes drifted from the lights to the vendor cart nearby, where steam curled invitingly from the pots of soup and cocoa. Elena felt her stomach clench, a physical blow of guilt. She saw him eyeing the warm pretzels, the steam rising from the paper cups held by other children. "Mama, can we have a pretzel? Just a small one?" Leo asked, his voice barely a whisper, afraid of the answer he already knew. Elena felt the world tilting. A pretzel cost $5, she had 3. "Leo, baby." "Not today," she said, her voice trembling, cracking under the weight of her failure. "We have the bread from yesterday, remember?" She opened the bag and pulled out a hard, day-old brioche bun. She broke it in half, giving the larger piece to him. Leo looked at the dry bread, then at the steaming cart, and finally at his mother's face. He saw the tears she was fighting to hold back. He took the bread without a word. "It's okay, Mama. I like bread," he lied, a brave little soldier in a war against poverty. Elena pulled him closer, wrapping her thin coat around his small shoulders. She wanted to scream. She wanted to rage at the husband who had gambled away their bakery, their home, and then vanished, leaving her with debt and a name blacklisted by every landlord in the city. She wanted to cry, but tears would freeze on her cheeks. "God," she whispered into the wind, "I don't ask for a miracle. I just ask for warmth. Just for tonight." She didn't know that 10 yards away her prayer was being heard not by the sky, but by a little girl in a red scarf. Mia tugged Thomas's hand harder. "Daddy," she said, her voice dropping to a serious, hushed tone. "That lady. She's crying, and the little boy is shaking. He wanted a pretzel, Daddy. I heard him. And she gave him old bread." Thomas looked closer. He saw the trembling hands of the woman. He saw the way she rubbed the boy's arms, trying to generate friction, heat, anything. He saw the defeat in her posture, the curvature of a spine crushed by an invisible load. It was a structural failure of society right before his eyes. "Wait here, Mia," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. He walked to the vendor cart. The vendor, a man with a thick beard and a wool cap, looked up. "What can I get you, sir?" "I want 2 large clam chowders, the hottest you have, and 2 pretzels, and 2 hot chocolates," Thomas ordered. He threw a $50 bill on the counter. "Keep the change." He balanced the tray, the heat radiating through his gloves. He walked back to Mia, and together they approached the bench. Elena looked up, startled, pulling Leo tighter against her. Her instinct was fear of authorities, fear of judgment. But she saw a man with sad eyes and a little girl holding a tray of steaming food. "Excuse me," Thomas said, his voice gentle, stripping away the authority he usually commanded on construction sites. "My daughter and we bought too much. We can't possibly eat all this. It would be a shame to let it go to waste. Would you help us?" Elena stared at him. She was a woman of pride. She had been a head pastry chef. She had managed a staff. Charity tasted bitter. But then she looked at Leo. She saw his eyes widen at the smell of the rich, creamy soup. "Please," Mia added, stepping forward. "The chocolate is really good." Elena's defenses crumbled. She nodded, unable to speak. Thomas placed the tray on the bench. Leo didn't wait. He reached for a pretzel, looking at his mom for final approval. She nodded, tears finally spilling over. "Thank you," she whispered. You don't know what this means." "I think I do," Thomas said softly. He watched them eat for a moment, the color returning to Leo's cheeks. "Stay warm." He took Mia's hand and walked away quickly before she could thank him again, before the dignity she was clinging to could unravel further. He didn't look back, but as he drove his Range Rover back to the cold, empty mansion, the image of that mother breaking bread burned in his mind. If you're finding this story touching, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Comment kindness below if you believe one small act can change a life. 4 days later, Thomas was sitting in the lobby of the Fairmont Copley Plaza. waiting for a meeting with a potential client. The hotel was a masterpiece of Gilded Age architecture, gold and marble everywhere. He was reviewing blueprints, sipping a black coffee, trying to drown out the noise of the bustling hotel. He needed a distraction. His life was a series of distractions now. Suddenly, a voice cut through the ambient noise. A voice he recognized. "I understand, chef, but I can work any shift. I can work nights, I can work double shifts. I was the head pastry chef at Dolce before it closed." Thomas looked over the top of his blueprints. Standing at the concierge desk speaking to the hotel manager was the woman from the park, Elena. She looked different. She had tried to clean up. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her clothes were brushed, though still worn. But the desperation was the same. The manager, a stiff man in a tight suit, shook his head. "Look, Elena, your resume is impressive. Your pastries are adequate. But you mentioned you have a child and no fixed address. We need reliability. We can't have you leaving in the middle of a dinner service because of a babysitter issue. This is a 5-star establishment." "I won't leave," Elena pleaded, her hands gripping the marble counter. "My son, he's quiet. He can sit in the break room." "Absolutely not," the manager scoffed. "Liability, I'm sorry. We have no position for you." Elena stood there for a moment, her shoulders slumping, the invisible weight returning to crush her. She turned around, her eyes glassy, fighting the breakdown that was threatening to consume her. "Excuse me," a deep voice boomed. Elena froze. She turned to see the man from the park standing up. Thomas. He walked over, ignoring the manager who was suddenly looking nervous. "Elena, isn't it?" "Yes," she whispered, shame flushing her cheeks. She didn't want him to see her like this, begging. "I couldn't help but overhear," Thomas said. He looked at the manager with a glare that could crack concrete. Then he looked back at Elena. "I have a proposition for you, if you have a moment." He led her to a quiet corner of the lobby seating area. He ordered her a tea. "I'm not stalking you," he said with a small self-deprecating smile, "but I believe in serendipity. My name is Thomas Sterling." Eleanor's eyes widened. She knew the name. Everyone in Boston knew the name. Sterling Architecture. "I have a house," Thomas began, looking at his hands. "A very large house, and a 7-year-old daughter, Mia. You met her, since my wife died. The house has fallen apart. Not the walls, but the life inside it. We eat takeout every night. The house is cold. Mia is lonely. I've hired nannies, but they are cold, corporate. They don't understand that a home needs a heart, not just management." Elena listened, holding her teacup with both hands to absorb the warmth. "I need a house manager," Thomas said firmly. "Someone to cook healthy meals, to organize the chaos, to be there when Mia gets home from school. But more than that, I need someone who understands struggle and survival. I saw you with your son. I saw how you protected him." He took a breath. "The salary is $5,000 a month. Full benefits." Elena gasped. "Mr. Sterling, And he interrupted, "The position is live-in. I have a guest suite on the 3rd floor. 2 bedrooms, a private bath, a small living area. You and your son would live there, rent-free, food included." Elena set the cup down because her hands were shaking too hard. This was a dream. It was a hallucination caused by hunger. "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "You don't know me. I'm homeless. I have bad credit." "Because," Thomas leaned in, his gray eyes intense, "my daughter hasn't stopped talking about the boy in the park since Sunday. And because I think you need a home as much as my home needs a mother's touch." Elena looked at him. She looked for the trap, the catch, but she saw only a man who was as broken as she was, just in a different way. "I accept," she whispered. "I accept." The following Monday, Elena and Leo stood before the massive oak doors of the Beacon Hill brownstone. They had 2 suitcases containing everything they owned. When the door opened, Thomas was there, dressed in a casual sweater, looking less like a titan of industry and more like a nervous dad. "Welcome," he said. Mia came running down the hallway, skidding on the marble floor. "Leo," she screamed. Leo, usually shy, broke into a grin. "Hi." Thomas led them upstairs. The house was magnificent. High ceilings, crown moldings, crystal chandeliers, but it felt sterile, like a museum where touching was forbidden. "This is your suite," Thomas said, opening a door on the third landing. It was beautiful. Warm beige walls, soft carpets, a window overlooking the Charles River. "And this," Thomas opened a smaller door, "is for you, Leo." It was a bedroom painted a soft blue. On the bed sat a new set of Legos and a warm, fluffy duvet. "Is this mine?" Leo asked, touching the bed frame as if it were made of gold. "All yours, buddy," Thomas said, his voice thick. Elena turned to the window to hide her tears. She had gone from a frozen bench to a palace in a week. She vowed right then and there that she would fill this house with so much warmth that the winter would never touch them again. The transformation was slow but undeniable. Elena didn't just clean and cook, she curated the atmosphere. The smell of stale air was replaced by the aroma of fresh yeast, cinnamon, and roasting rosemary. She was a master baker, after all. She started baking fresh brioche for breakfast, apple tarts for dessert. Thomas would come home from work, his shoulders knotted with stress, and the scent of vanilla would hit him at the door, instantly loosening the tension. Mia and Leo became inseparable. They built forts in the library using the sofa cushions. They chased each other through the garden. The sound of running feet and laughter replaced the silence. One rainy Tuesday evening, Thomas came home late. He found the house quiet. He walked into the living room and stopped. On the large rug, Elena was sitting with a book. Mia was asleep with her head on Elena's lap. Leo was asleep leaning against Elena's shoulder. She was reading softly, stroking Mia's hair with a gentle, rhythmic motion. Thomas leaned against the doorframe, watching. It was a tableau of everything he thought he had lost. Elena looked up, saw him, and put a finger to her lips. She smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up her eyes. Thomas felt his heart give a strange, painful lurch. It was the first time in 3 years he felt a desire to be part of the picture, not just the observer. But the true turning point came a month later. It was a stormy night. The wind was howling against the Victorian windows. Thomas was in his study when he heard a terrifying sound, the sharp, barking cough of a child in distress. He ran into the hallway. Elena was already there, rushing into Mia's room. "It's the asthma," Mia wheezed, clutching her chest, her face turning pale. She was panicking. Thomas froze. Flashbacks of his wife's final moments in the hospital paralyzed him, the machines, the beeping, the helplessness. He stood rooted to the spot, unable to move. But Elena moved. "Thomas, the nebulizer. Where is it?" she shouted, her voice commanding. I don't..." Thomas stammered. Elena didn't wait. She grabbed Mia, pulling her upright. "Look at me, Mia. Look at me. Breathe with me. In. Out." She was calm, an anchor in the storm. She rubbed Mia's back, keeping her grounded. "Leo, run to the bathroom. Get the blue bag in the cabinet." Leo ran. He came back with the kit. Elena set it up with practiced hands. She had dealt with Leo's bronchitis years ago. She placed the mask over Mia's face, soothing her, humming a soft Italian lullaby while the machine hummed. Thomas watched from the doorway, his hands shaking. He saw Elena holding his daughter, kissing her forehead, whispering words of courage. When Mia's breathing finally stabilized and she fell back asleep, Elena stood up. She walked over to Thomas. "She's okay," Elena said softly. Thomas collapsed onto a hallway chair, burying his face in his hands. I froze. I couldn't move. I'm her father, and I couldn't move. Elena knelt in front of him. She took his hands, strong, architect's hands that were now trembling, into hers. "You didn't freeze because you don't care, Thomas. You froze because you care too much. You are terrified of losing her. That's not weakness, that's love." Thomas looked up at her. In her eyes, he didn't see judgment. He saw understanding. He saw a shared language of trauma and survival. "Thank you," he whispered. "You saved her." "We are a team," Elena said. And for the first time, Thomas believed it. From that night on, the walls came down. Thomas started coming home earlier. He joined them for dinner. He helped Leo with his math homework. He sat in the kitchen while Elena kneaded dough, mesmerized by the strength and grace of her hands. They talked, not about schedules or groceries, but about their lives. Elena told him about her bakery, the Golden Crumb, and how she lost it. Thomas told her about the skyscrapers he designed that felt empty because he had no one to share the view with. Spring arrived, melting the snow in the garden. One Saturday morning, Thomas asked Elena to dress up. "I have a surprise. A site inspection," he joked. He drove them not to a construction site, but to a small, charming building on Charles Street, the most expensive retail street in Boston. It was a vacant storefront with large bay windows. "What is this?" Elena asked, holding Leo's hand. Thomas handed her a key. "Open it." Elena unlocked the door. Inside, it wasn't empty. It was fully equipped. Brand new convection ovens, marble countertops, proofing cabinets, a display case ready for pastries. "I don't understand," Elena said, spinning around. "I bought the building," Thomas said, standing in the doorway with Mia. "I designed the interior myself. It's a bakery. Your bakery. I'm not your boss anymore, Elena. I'm your investor, your partner." Elena covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Thomas, good, this is too much. I can't repay this." "You already haven't," Thomas said, walking over to her. "You repaid me every time you made my daughter laugh. Every time you made my house feel like a home. You brought the sun back into my life, Elena." Leo ran to the ovens. "Mom, look, it's huge." Elena looked at Thomas, seeing the man who had found her on a bench and brought her back to life. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll run it. Say you'll stay." "I'll stay," she whispered. "I'll always stay." The grand opening of Elena's was a sensation, but the real climax of their story happened 6 months later, in December. Thomas asked the whole family to go for a walk in the public garden. It was snowing again, just like the night they met. They walked to the bench, the same iron bench where Elena had broken the bread. Thomas stopped. "Do you remember this place?" "I remember," Elena said, shivering, but this time from emotion, not cold. She was wearing a beautiful camel cashmere coat Thomas had bought her. "I thought my life was over that night. And I thought mine was just a waiting room for death," Thomas admitted. He turned to Leo and Mia. "Kids, come here." He knelt down in the snow, ignoring the wetness soaking his knees. He looked at Elena. "Elena, I build structures for a living. I know that a building is only as strong as its foundation. You are my foundation. You are the warmth in the walls. You are the light in the windows." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside wasn't just a diamond ring, but 2 smaller silver bands. "Elena, will you marry me? And Leo, will you let me adopt you? Will you let me be your dad? I promise I will never let you be cold again." Elena sobbed, nodding vigorously. "Yes, yes." Leo threw his arms around Thomas's neck. "Yes, Dad," Mia cheered, clapping her gloved hands. "We're a real family." Passers-by stopped to watch as the 4 of them hugged on the snowy bench, a knot of warmth in the middle of winter. They walked back to the car, leaving the ghosts of their past on that bench. They were no longer broken fragments. They were a unified structure built on the strongest material on earth: kindness. The end. Thank you so much for watching this story. It reminds us that even in our coldest winters, spring is just one act of kindness away. We want to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment where a stranger changed your day or even your life? Share your story in the comments below. We are building a community of hope, and your voice matters. Please don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. See you in the next video.